Welcome back to In Focus. If you weren't tuned in to last segment, we covered Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. I couldn't help but think how many carbon emissions are being released from her trip to Asia. Not because I care about climate emissions, but because Pelosi is an avid climate crisis believer. She parrots the leftist talking points that we as humans have to do everything in our power, including decimating the lives of everyday Americans, to reduce our carbon footprint. In fact, just today, she tweeted her reason for visiting Malaysia was, quote, focused on sharing priorities including advancing security and stability in the region, strengthening economic ties, and addressing the climate crisis. The climate crisis, in her words. Here's another tweet from her. She says, as the climate crisis accelerates, we are seeing the damage of extreme weather around the world and here at home, posing an existential threat to our children, our security, our health, and our planet. Nations like ours have a moral duty to take decisive action to cut pollution now. You heard her. We have a moral duty to reduce our carbon footprint, to do everything we can to cut carbon emissions. Pelosi tweeted, likely from her charter jet, paid, putting off tons of emissions, all paid for by you, the taxpayers. Indeed, Pelosi took a private plane, had to have 4 warships deployed, landed in Taiwan to hop in her gas-guzzling vehicle fleet to go have meetings about things like addressing the climate crisis that's supposedly destroying our planet. This is akin to me describing myself as an avid vegan, let's say, insisting we have a moral duty to stop eating meat, and then after my speech is done, going to a cattle farmers convention and going to an all-you-can-eat steak buffet. It might be fair to point out then that I would not be practicing what I was preaching. Such is the case not just with Pelosi, but with all of the loudest voices of the so-called climate crisis team. Nancy Pelosi, who once demanded her own personal private jet from the Pentagon, is just one example. Pelosi has spent more than $500,000 on private jets since 2020 alone. But let's take other people. Let's take Taylor Swift as another example. The, for some reason, beloved pop star owns a private jet herself, and it has been used 170 times this year, estimating her flight emissions to be 8,293 tons by yard, which is apparently 1,185 times more than the average person's total yearly emissions. Now, she has actually been under fire for this by climate activists, so one of her reps responded to this and tried to get her off the hook, stating that not all of those flights were from her, but that, quote, Taylor's jet is loaned out regularly to other individuals. Oh, well shoot, never mind. I guess she's off the hook. It's not her alone that's emitting untold metric carbon of emissions. She's also enabling other people to help destroy the planet too. She probably rents the jet out as well, which means she's profiting off of the destruction of the earth. That makes it all better. Now, Oprah Winfrey is another supposed climate warrior who has a list of climate facts on her website with the claim that, yes, we need to get serious about caring for Mother Earth. And quick. Yes, quick! We must act quick, says the climate warrior who took 68 flights on her $75 million private jet this year, emitting about 499 times more CO2 than all the ordinary Americans that she's yelling at. Movie director Steven Spielberg has emitted 4,495 tons of CO2 in over 61 flights this year. Kim Kardashian, Mark Wahlberg, a slew of other celebrities have flown private on a regular basis while decrying the dangers of man-made climate change, supposed man-made climate change. Most notable of any of the climate shouters is Joe Biden himself. There he is, our commander-in-chief, the most prominent voice against man-made climate change. The man who has crushed Americans under his heel, whose administration demands everyone buy electric vehicles and eat bugs so we can save the planet from the inevitable destruction at the hands of mankind's carbon footprint. Indeed, Biden is so committed to the cause, more than Taylor Swift, more than everyone else. He's so committed, he goes to G7 summits, travels to meet with foreign leaders, goes and gives speeches about the horrors of man's carbon print on the globe. And he reportedly does it all with the help of 5 jets and 85 gas-guzzling vehicle motorcade. But he doesn't do this alone. He has enlisted the help of climate czar John Kerry to join him in fighting man-made climate change. You know John Kerry, the guy who owns a private jet also, that has emitted over 300 metric tons of carbon since Biden was sworn in. You might hear all of those examples and begin to wonder if any of these climate warriors, all who emit hundreds, potentially thousands of tons more in carbon emissions than you do, and you might question if they mean anything that they're saying. You might reasonably think if they really believe this stuff, wouldn't they put a drop of effort into at least trying to make it appear that they're doing their part to stop it, to stop trying to make sense of it? No, just stop. Just stop questioning your overlords. Stop it now. Ignore the red flags, close your eyes, and trust the experts. Joining me now is founder of the Climate Depot and author of the new book coming out this month, The Great Reset, Global Elites, and Permanent Lockdown, Mark Morano. Mark, thank you for bearing with me for that lengthy introduction, but I just, when I was doing research for this segment, I just kept seeing climate activists after climate activists after climate activists who decry the horrors of man's carbon footprint, and then they go and hop in their multi-million-dollar jet, and then they go and rent that jet out to other people, and then they hop in these gas-guzzling vehicles. There's no end to the double standard here.
No, there isn't. In fact, I used to work in the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and it was amazing when you talk to the general public and when you did this, what resonated most with the average person is the reason they were skeptical of the man-made climate crisis, which they kept hearing about, was the fact that the leaders of the movement were not taking it seriously and were not living a lifestyle that was conducive to that. We made a big deal in the Senate at the time of Al Gore's electricity use being 30 times that, 22 times, and it grew to 30 times or plus the average American. So what happens here is you have this essentially like the old Soviet Politburo, where one set of rules for thee, the wealthy elitist, the global governing elite, live one way, and the masses, that would be us, Addison, have to live another, and we're held to a different standard. But to add to what you said, you can add Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Bill Gates, and of course, John Kerry to the list here. What's so fascinating is they are so intent on keeping fossil fuels in the ground, at least that's what their rhetoric is, but they can't stop burning fossil fuels lavishly in the air.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you think about going back to President Biden, for example, the issue of practicing what you preach. If you, Mark, were to tell me to cut back on something I was doing, to reduce something I was doing, the level that I was doing it at, and then you went and indulged in it hundreds, thousands of times over how much I'm indulging in it, I would laugh you off as a sellout, as a fake, a phony, and rightfully so. So how are people not seeing that these people do not believe the lies that they're screaming at them? You have people doing everything they can. They've been sold this lie that man-made climate change is going to destroy the world any second now if we don't make sure all the lights are turned off, if we don't all buy Teslas and start eating bugs. These people aren't doing anything like that. You think Biden, you think Taylor Swift, you think John Kerry, you think Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, any of them, you think they're going to start eating bugs? You think they're going to stop flying private? No. So how have they so successfully pulled off this scam?
That's a great question. And they've done it through repetition. It's kind of like they just say it over and over, and they believe that, a lie told repeatedly will eventually be believed. But, if you look at it, I would say this celebrity list that you're citing from, they missed the obvious. It has to be Bill Gates as the #1 celebrity carbon footprint. At last check, he was spending $30,000 a month electricity bill at his own home. And Bill Gates was calling for longer COVID lockdowns. At the same time, he was bidding on the world's largest private jet transport company. But I think part of the agenda here is to get the average person to start accepting these limitations. And the reason the celebrities make great spokesmen is for some reason people look up to them, and for some reason most people don't actually connect the hypocrisy. But if you look at it, Leonardo DiCaprio has actually said publicly, I will fly around the world to fight global warming. Like, he didn't understand the hypocrisy in that. He lives on yachts. He parties on them. He has a gigantic carbon footprint. At these UN summits that I attend every year, this one's in Egypt in November, the local airports at the UN summits are full of CEO, world leaders, and celebrity private jets. And you'll get people like Leonardo DiCaprio, Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford, by the way, bragged at one point that he flew up the coast just to get a cheeseburger because he had his own pilot's license and just liked that. Can you imagine the carbon footprint of just flying up? Now, I don't think it was a private jet, but it was still his private plane. And I asked him about that at the UN Climate Summit in Madrid in 2019. I said, do you still fly up the coast for a hamburger? Trying to get him to admit to hypocrisy. But his answer was, Well, I'm a vegan now. In other words, I
Mm.
don't do that because I don't eat meat anymore. Well, do you fly up the coast for a vegan burger? That's the next question that I was unable to ask him. But this is insidious. This is the whole movement. What's interesting is the same week this report came out on these celebrities, Addison, the World Economic Forum came out and is calling for limitations to eventually lead to an end to private car ownership. The UK Transport Secretary has already said that owning a car is outdated 20th century thinking. And you also have airline travel being limited, short haul flights in Europe because their carbon footprint's too big. The cost of fuel and regulations are jacking up airline costs. So we're facing a perverse example where celebrities like Taylor Swift, celebrities like Steven Spielberg and Oprah and John Kerry, they'll be able to fly. They're not going to notice the climate agenda. But all the rest of us are going to have trouble with gas powered cars, private car ownership, affording average airline tickets. This is the insidiousness of this whole debate. And they get away with it because they use fear and now emergency powers. COVID, they got away with all the lockdowns for 2 years because they had an emergency declaration. And now we have Senator Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, House Democrats urging Joe Biden to declare a national climate emergency. 130 powers, executive powers, will be immediately granted to him and governors, mayors. They can start restricting us even more. This is how celebrities get away with it because they scare the rest of us and they hope no one notices what they're up to. And frankly, most of the public doesn't notice the hypocrisy.
Mark, I think with that news about them, calling cars something that's outdated and that we need to get rid of, I think we need a second come and take it flag. This time with a big gas guzzling diesel truck. A diesel truck on the front of it. Come and take it. Come and take my diesel truck. I don't think that's going to happen. I certainly hope not. But this should be a reminder to Americans to always to question authority and question those who are telling you something, especially when the something that they're telling you is something that they themselves are doing. When they're telling you not to do what they themselves do more, that should be cause for concern. And you should take their words with a grain of salt. Mark Morano from the Climate Depot. As always, great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison. Appreciate it.